one of the unique value adds over at Cowboy is offering above keystone margins. There's a lot of benefits from bringing on a company like this. And it's really just getting it out into the market so people understand it. I would love to create a custom little cowboy band with a little like cuter, maybe like sterling silver, like buckle or emblem, and then a joint holder on it.
He's done retail, he's done wholesale. Now he's building a better supply chain for everyone. Avery Leveston is the founder and CEO of Cowboy Kush, a cannabis brand flipping the Massachusetts market with full flower products and a model built on cooperation, not competition.
So even if I don't create a great relationship with a ton of customers, say I only see 5, I'm gonna make sure that I create an amazing relationship with every one of those team members, and they never forget Avery Leveston. When they come in and they ask a budtender, what do you recommend? If that budtender recommends your product, you're already a step up above everyone else.
This isn't your average distributor. Cowboy Kush puts smaller growers first, cuts out shake and trim, and makes sure everyone in the chain gets their fair share.
I want to get out here to emphasize, try this product out, right? It's a differentiated product out in the market. It's not, what we're seeing out there where it's maybe, a little trim material, trim and shake, that's great. We're just a different type of product.
This is execution, not theory, from someone who's lived every layer of the game.
I'm Avery Leveston, founder with Cowboy Kush. We're a agricultural cooperative style business where we work with local farmers on the cultivation side, and we say, you're a farmer, you focus on growing the best quality product, we're going to focus on taking care of the rest of the supply chain for you. And so we handle their manufacturing, sales, marketing, distribution, and I also handle a little bit of the collections to ensure that everyone's getting paid on time. As we all know in this space, it's it's tough to get some payments sometimes, but that's what we do, I would say, in kind of a layman's description.
So this is a collective. I wasn't aware of that. So we've known each other for years now, and I always think to myself, like, Avery's up to something. And I've seen you at so many spots, right? You were at Regenerative, you were at Trade Roots, I think, at one point.
Green Care, now Perpetual.
Green Care, which is now Perpetual.
Yeah.
Perpetual took over. So, like, there's so many spots that I've seen you in. What made you take the decision? What made you take the leap to go into your own brand?
Yeah, so I think, for me, 8 years in the space, right, handled pretty much everything you can think of in cannabis supply chain, right, cultivation, propagation, all the way to overseeing retail. And eventually, utilizing all the sales tactics that I've always had at my disposal, hopped into wholesale, and I was like, I'm kind of liking this, it's nice to like talk with people, build relationships, get deals closed, figure how to solve problems. But I continued doing that, and I was on a path where I would get us into so many stores, and then, I'd hit a point where it's essentially a wall, and I'd be like, there's not really a lot of growth after this. I can go after new clients. They're clients that are notorious maybe for not paying, not communicating right. So I was like, I was
be careful with those.
Exactly, right? I don't want to put the company in kind of an overextended position, if you will. Right. So, it happened a few times. And at a certain point in my career, I was like, I'm still in my 20s. I want to do something, right? I've always been a guy who just, wants to go a little bit above and beyond, right? And not just go to do the base, right? So I hit a wall at my last company in terms of distribution, and I was like, let's launch my own distribution. And at the same time, I was also seeing kind of a problem in the market. Like, a lot of the cultivators, a lot of the farmers weren't able to distribute the product or get paid on time, like we were talking about earlier. So I was like, what if I could kind of combine my sales and distribution skills with the farmers? We can kind of cooperate together, similar to an agricultural cooperative, where essentially the cooperative will, all the farmers work together. They manufacture the products and get them to grocery stores. They all work together and essentially build that business in cannabis, the first of its kind.
I love it. I love it because I do feel like, growers are great at growing, but they're not necessarily good at everything else that comes after that. And I think a lot of people who came in because they love the plant kind of get left at the doorstep of like, hey, but like, who's going to buy it? And now I got to go to door, knocking on doors to like go get my products into these stores. But you're providing that service ultimately for that. And so, but Cowboy Kush is ultimately your brand, right?
Correct.
I mean, I've been rocking a cowboy hat for a minute now.
Yeah.
So like, is that where it came from? Like that's where the idea and the name?
Yeah. So, I was just mentioning it, briefly before, but the Cowboy Kush idea actually stemmed from the business card that I created. So obviously you mentioned, the cowboy hats were a thing of mine.
Yeah.
And at one point, I don't know when it was, I was like, I want to do something a little different.
Right,
Always been a little different, Jason.
Right.
And so I was like, why don't I design a business card like my cowboy hats?
Right.
Start handing it out.
Right.
So I did that. And, all of a sudden, people are like, dude, this is kind of cool. Like,
Right.
I'm going to throw this on my fridge, next to my like family portrait.
Right.
Just highlight it, throw a magnet on the fridge. So it started catching on to me that, it may be something more than just a business card.
Right.
And, as it grew and expanded, I kept hearing that term more and more. And so I was like, I got to find a way to essentially make a brand out of this.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what I did. And, that's where we're at today.
Yeah. And so when you think about brand, clearly there's a mark, right?
Yeah.
And there's a trademark, but there's like an actual mark.
Yeah.
Did you design all this stuff yourself? Did you hire somebody? Were you just like, or are you just totally from the top down, the vision and the creator of all that stuff?
So I would say one of my strengths, Jason, is delegation. Okay. Very, very good at working with the right people. I say, part of our cooperative is essentially I put all the right people in the right room together and we're all working as a team.
Yeah.
I even like Megan Dobro, who you just had on the podcast, she's going to be testing a lot of our products. She's part of kind of this whole operational process to assist us. But long story short,
Yeah, brand. It's like what? Like, did you you're delegating off to like designers and all that stuff?
that's exactly, Jason. So what happened here is I had the idea of the business card, right? Called up to some designers that I had in Ohio, and I was like, hey, turn this into a kind of a physical thing for me. So they have helped me with the first step. And then from there, I worked to expand it and create an actual brand. There was actually a woman named Molly Plotcher, used to work with my father back when my father used to work at Nike Golf, and she handled a lot of the marketing over there. She now runs her own company, but she helped to complete the last leg of this journey and bring that business card into fruition, create an entire branding guide, even utilize colors, very strategic on the bottom, specific text, right? That we're going to use at different points, even different images, for whether it's clicks or whether it's, a top logo, like a banner up here, the top cowboy, high quality, high value, or the little marks, like in my business card.
Yeah, because that's what I'm thinking about. It's like for a person who's starting out in any industry, not even just cannabis, it's like a lot of people maybe don't even have the next step in their head of like, what do I have to do now, right? They'll go onto Canva, they'll probably use a template, they'll put like a logo together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But your strength being in delegation, you're immediately like, okay, I know my skill set.
Yes.
But I know other people's skill sets also. And like, I'm going to go find the designer that I like their approach to things. And I'm going to go hire that person to like bring this to life.
That's it.
So when it comes to, I guess, stepping back a little bit, what products do you even make?
Yeah. So,
I think pre-rolls, eighths, like just raw flower, bulk or anything like that? Like,
yeah. So essentially what we do is, we're focusing on flower for the start.
Okay.
We didn't want to offer a bunch of product lines, to start and get into the market, offer, 10 different product categories, all this crazy stuff. We wanted to focus on what we're best at, right? So we focused on flower. We're doing 1 gram pre-rolls. Then we're doing pre-ground flower. This is where a differentiator for us comes in. We don't sell shake and trim. A lot of what's, been going around in the market, people are looking for affordable prices, right? And, a lot of operations don't always have that maybe pre-ground product available. So what they'll do is they'll have the shaker trim, maybe, some loose flour, very, very, ground up pieces, and they'll combine it all together, put it in a bag, slap a COA on it, and sell it to you. Instead, what we have is a very unique QC process where we're going to de-stem our plants, we're going to buck them, we're going to defan them, and then we're going to grind up those small nugs with sugar leaves on it that contain some trichome and, cannabinoid content, right?
Right.
That's going to be our full flower pre-ground.
Got it.
And the cool thing about our pre-ground is it's still going to be at the same price of what that shaker trim is at due to the economics of how our farmers and I operate.
Oh, I got it. Yeah.
So we're able to offer a 7 gram at $10.
Wholesale.
Wholesale, which is amazing. Very, very competitively priced product. But like I said, our differentiator is the full flower product with high terpenes all throughout it instead of shaker trim.
Well, that was my ultimately my first question to you was going to be like, why another flower brand?
110%.
Like, why? Like, there's so many flower brands. Now, to be fair, we operate in a tiny market. The tincture category is 1.5% of the market. It's
I thought it was like 3%.
No, it's 1.5. I keep a good look at these things. We have data up the wazoo here.
Yeah.
So like 1.5% approximately is the tincture category. Now, flower is still like 70%. So obviously there's a and that's not even including like vapes and all this other stuff, right? So just flower products alone, you're obviously playing in a very big market, but it has been considered saturated in parts. I was talking to the GM of a store just yesterday, and they were like, yeah, we're still seeing this big shift from people who are like still tack hunting, and they're just looking for the most THC for the cheapest price. And he's like, it kills me. He's like, I don't want to sell these products, but that's what people keep on demanding.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's a perpetuation of like news stories of like the commoditization of flower and the dropping in price compression. Like, I don't know if that's just like people reading and be like, oh, there must be cheap flower somewhere, so I'm going to keep on just asking for cheap flower basically wherever I go. So is the consumer demanding it, or then the stores are demanding it, and then all of a sudden the cultivators are like, okay, I guess that's what we have to do. So that's why I was thinking to myself, like, why another flower brand of all the things that you could be working on?
Well, so Jason, you know, one of the big things, right? And you hit it on the head, right? Biggest category, what is currently flower, it's always going to be flower,
yeah, kind of
right?
will be, yeah.
It will be, right? Whether you combust that product or you vaporize it, you know, however you consume that product, flower will always be the largest portion of the market. But when I took a step back, I looked at that, and within that market, there's also micro markets, Jason, right? And in my economist head, I always think of things in like either supply and demand or markets. And so I looked at the market and I was like, well, there's a value portion of the market, right? You know, there's plenty of consumers, millions of Americans who want to come in and buy an affordable, you know, cannabis product, and they're looking for a specific ailment. Maybe they're just looking for anxiety reduction, pain reduction, or they're just looking to enjoy the rest of the day, whatever it may be.
Right.
But they're looking for an affordable smoke, okay? There has not been a brand that I believe out in Massachusetts who really focused on the value category. There's been add-ons, and I've seen tons of value brands who have like added on.
Like a sub-brand of their existing brands. And
Exactly.
like that,
Sub-brands. There's been plenty of value brands out there, but there's no one who's really doubled down on that, right? And focused on the value category being the highest quality at that highest value point. And so that's kind of where, you know, high quality, high value comes into play here.
Yeah, I was noticing that high quality, high value. Obviously, you know, that's like a buyer's dream. Of course, we want high quality, and we also want that value, right? Yeah. So, like, I can understand the buyers wanting to be, or would be interested in this brand. Like, what is your go-to-market strategy right now? You're launching? I think your first products are going to be hitting the market soon, right?
Yeah. So, you know, with our distribution strategy, you know, I think I outlined this a little earlier, but it's very strategic and different than a lot of other distributors in the space, right? A lot of distributors, they'll sell into a store, right? And they're always thinking about their quota, their numbers they got to hit, right? With me, we've built a business where our margins are healthy on the back end, right? We don't need to sell to everyone. There's no need to sell to everyone.
So you're being more selective with who you send this product to.
Exactly. I'll go into an area, and, you know, fortunately, I have 8 years of experience, so I have a very large Rolodex of clients who I've already worked with. But, you know, I'm going to analyze, you know, order size, what you're going to take on from us, how you're going to communicate, how are you going to pay, if it's going to be on time, early, or if you're not going to pay on time. All of those factors come into play for me to determine if it's worthwhile to really create a partnership with you. Because at that point, you know, you and I know it's great to make a sale, but if you make a $10,000 sale and you never get paid, you never get talked to, is that really a true sale, and is it worthwhile, more importantly, for the company? Like, is it great for the company? So that's the kind of the viewpoint of Cowboy. And, you know, what we've done here is we sold out our whole first menu. So it's all completely sold out. You know, I've been talking to a lot of clients over months, but we'll have 12 take on orders next week. And then we'll have one new client take on an order. So a new client, in my eyes, is one owner who owns 1 to 3 dispensaries. And every week that client will be, you know, delivered to. Pop-ups, launch pop-ups will be that. Trainings. So I have a whole training guide that I've built out. I'll obviously provide a little bit of marketing materials, custom displays. and all of that to properly onboard that partner for an entire 7-day period of time. If they want, we can do 2 pop-ups. It's all going to be run by me. I'll do 2. No
I was
problem.
going to ask you about that because it's like we always go back and forth into ROI on pop-ups. Because we're just like, well, because we hear horror stories sometimes. We're like, all right, this person drove an hour and a half to this store.
Of course.
They saw 3 people in the 2 hours they were there, and they turned around and left. Like, how do you prevent stuff like that from happening?
So, what I've learned in my time, right? The key, and, I might be sharing some really quiet information here, but the key in my eyes to this cannabis operation, everything in the cannabis world, are the budtenders, the leads, and the team members, right? Mm-hmm. They are the people who are selling our brands, mm-hmm. right? When I am not in their store, it's the budtenders, the leads, the managers, whoever it may be. So even if I don't create a great relationship with a ton of customers, say I only see 5, I'm going to make sure that I create an amazing relationship with every one of those team members, and they never forget Avery Leveston or the Cowboy. Yeah. And that's important because you and I know it's a new market. People are looking to try new things all the time. Yeah. When they come in and they ask a budtender, what do you recommend? If that budtender recommends your product, you're already a step up above everyone else.
Right, exactly. No, that's fair. Yeah, budtenders, we always say that like they're the gatekeepers in a sense.
Of course.
Right? They're the front lines of your brand ultimately because, it kind of goes both ways, but I've heard stories all over the place with GMs and leads and stuff like that talking about their budtenders staff, and as much as budtenders would love to spend like 10 minutes with each customer and talking them through all the value propositions, they're like, hey, have you considered Good Vibes or Cowboy or whatever? Like, there's other products out there you should try. They don't have time for these things, and oftentimes they don't train for a lot of this stuff, right?
No.
So they're just like, okay, what do you want? All right, I'm looking for something for paint. All right, here's a pre-roll. Like, get out of here.
That's it.
And then just moving. It's like, because sometimes you're so busy. So on the other side of it, like you might see 3 customers in a store, mm-hmm. but sometimes in those 2 hours you might see 100+ customers, right? So it's just like interacting with those customers during pop-ups, but then when you're not there, having the budtenders to have little tidbits of one-liners to like, hey, have you considered trying Good Vibes or whatever, right?
That's it.
So we're always trying to train our budtenders to be like that. And so education obviously is key in this case.
It's very important.
But you're talking about like a 7-day plan for that first kind of client, right? For every new client.
Every client of mine, is going to get a 7-day custom onboarding plan. And that's going to be a compilation of trainings, pop-ups, marketing drop-off, maybe some food and drink just to make sure their team's happy, right? Talking to them what products they like, maybe even spending 2 hours with them and saying, hey, the budtender that sells the most, I'll buy you a couple pre-rolls at the end, right? Doing things like that just to really, create that brand loyalty between, the employee or the team member and the brand itself.
Yeah, because you're talking about 12 and then going to be 13, right, customers on launch. And when I think of that, I think obviously that's very manageable for you at 12 because it's like, okay, for the next, 12 weeks or whatever, I'm going to 6 weeks, I'm going to do 2 stores a week and I'm just going to nail it every single time. Right?
Yep.
So what happens after that though? Like if you're the marketing and sales, you're basically the all-in-one kind of solution for marketing and sales. Mm-hmm. And now it's like operations, finance, AR, right? There's other components to it as well. Like, where do you see yourself going from there then? Is it like you're building a team around yourself at some point, like delegation style?
Yeah, no, I do see expansion is going to be a very, very big thing. The most unique aspect is, how our business is built. I have to make sure that, we're able to pay, new employees properly. And so I've estimated that around the 45 to 50 client mark is when I'm going to really exceed my capacity. Historically, I've been able to manage 50 clients and service them properly. I think that's
not like 100 and then be like, I'll talk to you occasionally.
Well, that's different. Exactly. Right. There's a lot of people who have mentioned like, oh yeah, I can handle a bunch of clients, but can you really service them properly? Right. Because you and I know like the service is so important.
Yeah. I'm laughing a little bit because I know how our team has on each salesperson right now. I'm a little bit embarrassed.
It's A-okay. Look, you got to do what you got to do, especially when you're growing as a company, right? And that's why, I'm going to be doing the marketing, the pop-ups, the onboarding, the sales, the collections, right? But, in that position, I've understood that between 45 and 50 clients is when, I'm going to have to be either looking or already have someone on board, which I am estimating probably closer to like the 30, 35. Yeah, is when I'm really going to start looking for people because, like I said, the focus of our brand is high quality, high value.
Right.
And, one of the core attributes is service. We're going to constantly be providing within 30-day pop-ins, always visiting your store, constantly available. It's just...
So what are the scalable things that you're doing right now then? So you'd mentioned a handbook, for instance, or like an education book. Is that something scalable then? So it's like you kind of build it once, maybe update it occasionally, and that kind of gets handed off to your budtenders?
You got it. Exactly. Yeah. So I've had, a really good guy. Actually, he's down in Boca Raton, Florida. His name is Cannon. Really great.
Awesome name.
Amazing name. Cannon. You can't get away with that. It's
coming straight at you.
Yeah, coming right at you. So, ironically, he runs a website in a business called Cannon Menus. He creates custom digital menus. Unbelievable. And so he's worked with me to create kind of this custom training guide. Most of it will be, replicated later on. The only additions we'll need to make are the partner farms that we're going to take on in the future.
Okay.
We have a great set list, but because we only, are selling to 12 clients, we only purchased, from a couple of the farms.
Right, exactly.
To make sure that we're not overextending ourselves.
Yeah, we can actually, so I do want to dive into the co-op model, and I do want to talk about the farms in a second, but just to kind of polish off the marketing and sales, or marketing specifically side of this. So there are some scalable things in here, such as creating that kind of that menu system, in the education guides and stuff like that. What is the least scalable part of what you're doing right now? Is it the pop-ups potentially? Is it like...
Yeah, I would say the physically being present, aspects of the business, right? Because at the end of the day, I always say like every person has 24 hours in the day, and it's, how you use that time is really, up to you. So, for me, right, once I get to that, 30 or 40 number, I'm physically going to be unable to visit every store, pop into every store, train up all the staff, and that's going to be something where I'm 110% going to need additional employees.
Are they going to wear cowboy hats?
Oh yeah, I'm planning. I mean, one of the marketing things aside, I'll definitely bring in is, I'm working with a group out in Boston. Yeah. They own Rick Walkers, a bunch of Western gear, but they're working with me to create some custom cowboy hats.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And one of the cool aspects with the cowboy hat is, these bands on the top are interchangeable. Oh. So this is actually a horsehair band. It's made from compilation of a bunch of different horses. And so you can interchange different bands, but I would love to create a custom little cowboy band with a little like pewter, maybe like sterling silver, like buckle or emblem, and then a joint holder on it.
Joint holder.
Yeah, yeah. Like so something really just a little different.
Yeah. Well, it definitely stands out, right? That's what I was like. I could imagine you have at some point like a field marketing team, and they're all wearing cowboy hats, pre-roll holder, and the little emblem on the side, and they're like going out, and every time you walk through the door, when your staff walks through the door, they're like, "Oh, Cowboy's here."
Yep.
That's a great visual, you know what I mean, from a marketing perspective, because then oh, Cowboy's here. We're going to get either snacks or they're going to come and talk to us for a little bit and blah, blah, blah. I love that. That's actually fantastic. I should make all my employees wear white glasses.
I'll tell you, that's it's something I actually included on my website when I was talking about the cowboy hat, but there's this really, really cool book, 92 successful things you can do to like create great relationships. One of the chapters, I forget the number, but it was called What's It? And it simply said, or obviously over like 10 pages, but it said, what's it? Wear something that makes people question, like, or just even think about you. You're kind of standing out in a crowd. And so ever since reading that novel towards the end of college, that's when I started wearing the Stetsons a lot. Because I was like, that's
something that you wanted to make sure that people would be like, oh,
yeah,
Avery.
Yeah. And even, that was one of the big reasons why I've officially launched this in the brand, because I'll tell you, I started wearing my cowboy hats, started traveling around the state. When I didn't wear the cowboy hat and walk in dispensaries, people would be like, where's the hat? They would literally remember me as the cowboy with the hat. And so it just kind of caught on with a lot of people. And I was like, this is starting to create some kind of, almost brand, if you
Yeah, exactly. Well, I incidentally, the white glasses for me were one of the things that people kept on asking me about and stuff like that. And so, and it was a thing. My wife was like, hey, you maybe try white glasses one time or something like that. And I wore them, and then you know how often you change glasses. It's like maybe 6 months, a year, like I get a new exam and then like I have to change my glasses again. Mm-hmm. But over that year, I was building the company, and people kept on recognizing me for having white glasses. And so I was like, well, now I have to have white glasses everywhere I go, right?
Yeah.
So it became a mark of mine, but like totally unintentionally. And now I think about, that's a great way of putting it. Like, what are the things that you can do to stand out, actually make sure that people understand that this is different. This is a different type of company here, and we stand for something very specific, right?
Yeah.
High quality, high value, for instance.
That's it.
I love that stuff. So the scalable stuff, totally get it. The not scalable stuff, I totally hear your pains there, because we're living it right now. Because it's like, all right, we got a bunch of stores we're in. How do you service them all really, really well, right? Yeah. So there's definitely aspects of that ring true to my heart. I do want to get to the agricultural side, though.
Yeah.
I am an awful cultivator. I cannot grow anything to save my life. My mother can grow things beautifully. My grandfather, he would always have these beautiful tomato plants every year. We'd have fresh tomatoes. And it was just like, my family's filled with green thumbs.
Yep.
I do not have that.
Never.
So I just does something about it. Like, either I don't have the patience for it, or I don't know what it is. But like, I've tried growing before. I grew some larfy buds one time. It was all like falling apart. I'm like, well, I could probably consume this, right? And so, I buy myself a rosin press. I just press it and make, rosin out of it or something. But when I think about the co-op side of this, or at least the cultivator side of this, I think to myself, obviously, again, going back to my original point, it is hard to market yourself. It is hard to sell your products if you've never done any of that stuff before. And with all your experience, of course, you have an easy way for them to get to the market and that path forward that they maybe didn't have access to before, right? Do you so you're working with how many cultivators right now?
So, to start, about only three. We've had verbal commitments from almost 15.
Okay.
Which is really,
so as you scale, you'll be able to pull these things up. So
correct.
Is it Cowboy Kush?
So Cowboy Kush is the name. I had to file a DBA. Fun fact.
Can't use the word Kush.
Can't use the word Kush as a colloquial term, even though Khalifa Kush is on the market. It's just so interesting. Wow. It's just a super interesting thing with the CCC.
I had the same thing.
And my inspector, it's just, it's just a different opinion. And it was just really tough, because I would love to have Cowboy Kush out there. I think it's a great word to say, Cowboy Kush.
Yeah, totally.
Unfortunately, I had to go a different way.
Yeah, unfortunately, you got castrated on that one, because Kush is a pretty solid name. I think and that's when I first started this venture, I actually called it Cannabis Every Day, or Everyday Cannabis. And so, because I came from a medical issue myself, and so I was like, if I can consume cannabis every day, and it's been a stigma of mine for 20 years or whatever, I was part of the Dare generation growing up in the 80s. Now that I look back at those days, I'd be like, well, if it was so demonized, but I'm consuming it, I'm a high-functioning person, hence the podcast name, and there are a lot of high-functioning, people out there that consume cannabis. I think every day people could be consuming cannabis. So I was like, everyday cannabis, done, right? However, the word cannabis couldn't happen. I couldn't do it because of also the Massachusetts corporations. So they wouldn't allow the word cannabis in my name even.
Really?
The corporate side.
Oh, wow. The corporate divisions wouldn't even...
Yeah, the corporate division. So it's stuff like that. It's just like, you don't know going into it.
Yeah.
And so when you're first starting out, if you're listening to this and you're, trying to start your own brand, whether in cannabis or not, there's so many of these hiccups that you don't even understand. You don't know it's going to happen until it happens, right? Kind of thing. Yep. And unless you've done it 1,000 times, I still stumble into issues all the time. And I've had 15 companies at this point for all I remember. So for me, it's just you don't know when you're first starting up what potentially problems it might occur.
No.
When you're going to source these cultivators, were there people who pushed back and said, I don't need Avery, I don't want to deal with any of that, I'll do it myself? Were there any stumbling blocks kind of potentially when you were courting these cultivators?
So it's interesting you bring that up. I haven't had any objections, but I've had people not truly understand the business model because it comes from that cooperative, style business. Cooperatives are very prominently around America. They're just almost underground.
Yeah, they're kind of hidden.
And people don't know. I mean, I'll give an example. Dairy Farmers of America essentially takes, dairy products and puts them in grocery stores, multi-billion-dollar cooperative, but no one knows they exist, right?
They don't think as a cooperative.
Look at, Hood and Gerlich Farms. You see those trucks all over the Mass Pike, everywhere. Those two companies are part of DFA. So they're part of the cooperative, and most people don't even know that. They literally drive by those trucks every day. Mm-hmm. So it's, what I was getting to is there was a lot of people that were just like, oh, you're just doing the broker model. And I'm like, no, we're really working like a symbiotic cooperative group. Like it's a different relationship. It's not just me saying, oh, I need bulk at this price. And if you can't sell it to me, like too bad, you're going to sell to me at that. I'm coming to the farmers. I'm sitting down. I have my partners from High Plains. I'm actually, it's kind of I own the full company. I own everything. But we have a licensing agreement in place with High Plains. So
Because there's manufacturing involved too.
because they manufacturing and because they have to have a license. Exactly. They're the license holders. And so they kind of partake with me to help source. And so essentially we work together with our farms. Everyone we approach, we sit down, we say, we have to buy product, bulk product in this range, right? What can you provide it to us at? That's our first question, right? And our second question is, what are you producing at?
Right.
Right? And the reason we ask those questions is because we're a transparent group. We want to make sure you're making money and we're making money, right? If you're not making money and we're making money, we don't do the deal.
Right.
And that's the way we operate. We're a very different, group. And I want to stress that cooperative style, and kind of working together. That's really what we do. So a lot of people thought it was just like, oh, it's just a broker model. And I'm like, no, we're actually working with the farmers to reduce their overhead,
Right.
potentially reduce manufacturing costs, sales and distribution costs, marketing, take that all off their plate,
Right.
reduce those COGS a ton, and say, hey, we'll actually buy your bulk for $50 a pound more while reducing your COGS.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's like, it's the first of its kind in the state. No one's doing it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never heard of that model before
Yeah.
because I don't think of co-ops ever. I think the
That's-
last time I thought of a co-op was my kids went to a co-op school. It's literally called the co-op school in Brooklyn.
Really?
And then there was also, again, back in Brooklyn, maybe they're just more prominent there, I don't know. There's grocery stores that were like cooperatives.
Yeah.
And so they were buying, I guess, from local farmers and stuff like that as part of a cooperative kind of deal.
Mhm.
And but to get membership to that, I think you also had to be able to shop at that store. I think you had to be a member, which means you had to put in like a volunteer time to actually even shop at that store. There's like so many interesting models that come along with that.
Well, the cooperative, in a sense, and this is why I say cooperative style.
Yeah.
A cooperative is like an equally shared business. So all the farmers, like in a co-op sense, for instance, like a DFA, all the farmers actually have like
A share.
a share of the company. Ours is different because it's a cooperative style. It's based off of that like cooperation and working together, but I own the company. And that's what it's more of, I'm going to the table and kind of, emphasizing the cooperative ideals and standards, but without the business cooperative structure, if that
Got
makes
it.
sense.
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're also providing a much needed service, right? So you're
Yes.
saying basically like, okay, I'll buy for more money. I'll actually help you reduce your COGS.
Yep.
Or become more efficient with it as well. So
Yep.
technically, if you're part of this cooperative, then you're more efficient with cash flow and stuff like that as well.
That's it.
So that's interesting. Like, how does it work when it comes to the payment side? So like, after the product is manufactured and sold in the dispensary, and then the dispensary actually pays you, is that when the stores when the cultivators get paid, or do you buy it up front for them?
So, the way we've set everything up is our first orders that go out next week, almost all of those orders, I've managed to talk to the clients and make them COD.
Okay.
And, last
Giving
year...
them, so you mean talking about the dispensaries?
The
So you're
dispensaries.
basically saying to the dispensaries like, hey, this is a different model. This is like, we need to get COD because the farmers have to get paid.
You got it. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm pitching to them. And so that's going to allow me, these farmers have, built a great relationship with me. So they've extended net 30 terms.
Mm-hmm.
And, if they do listen to this podcast, they'll find some insight, but we are planning to pay them way before that 30-day period as kind of a surprise, right?
Yeah,
To show them, hey, look, this is how we operate. I made our dispensary partners COD us just so we can pay you.
Yeah.
Right? Because we want to work together with you continuously. And I think it's a different approach than what we've seen out in the market.
And you said you had 15 kind of handshake agreements, like in the future,
Correct.
this is potentially, more partners.
Yeah.
So as you kind of expand the brand and you get to that 50, 35-ish store mark and you start hiring that second person, obviously the revenues that come through from this were going to allow you to like grow and scale within the market.
Of course.
Like, how big can this get in Massachusetts, for instance?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really looking,
What number do you want to be in the list of growers or of brands?
I mean, for me, I've always been a person, I want to build a business to be successful and continuously grow and expand, but I never was the individual to go up and, need millions and millions of dollars and, sell to everyone and make tons of money. So my goal is really to hit between 75 and 100 retail dispensaries in Massachusetts. Great, pretty good market penetration, right? Great distribution. So we have, touch points in every sector of the state, every county. I think it was looking at 300 and something, almost 400 towns in Mass. So
392 or something.
Yeah, something crazy. So, I'm very strategic on who I sell to. And that's why I was saying earlier, like, go into a town, figure out who the best partner is. And just in terms of communication, paying, who's even going to support, me, or even understand the really, what we're bringing to the table. Because you mentioned something earlier, the TAC-driven market. TAC is such a big thing right now. I have plenty of 22, 23, 24 percenters on the menu, but it's full flower. It's high terpene full flower, and that's a big thing. And, some people won't fully want to work with us, and that's totally okay. They want to focus on the TAC, but, if they come back over time.
I was going to say, is that particularly one of the biggest, not drawbacks, but one of the biggest reasons why a dispensary wouldn't want to work with you?
I would say that, yeah. I mean, I have a wonderful diversity because I have a compilation of outdoor greenhouse and indoor cultivators. And so that allows me to, offer a great diversity of TAC levels. Everything from my cutoffs 20 all the way up to, I got 37 percenters. 37%.
That seems crazy.
But Jason,
37% means that,
it's 32, technically 37 TAC, but
right. That's what I'm saying. Even though that, if you think about that, that means you're talking about, because I was just going to nerd out real quick, because it's
please tell me
the trichomes, right? The trichomes contain the cannabinoids and the terpenes and stuff like that. So everything's kind of encapsulated in these little secondary metabolisms of these little mushroom tipped kind of
little trichome heads,
right? Little trichome heads. And that's why what people call separating the trichome heads into making actual hash, stuff like that. But when I think about 37%, I think up to myself, 37% to me almost seems close to 50%, which means that half the weight, in this case 37% of the weight, is actually in cannabinoids, and the rest of it's plant matter.
Yeah.
So to me, that just seems crazy. But I've heard of these things before, but to me, it just sounds unfathomable, probably because I'm a really bad grower, and would never be able to approach those numbers,
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, also, those higher numbers come from indoor where you can control the environment. But to be honest, I'm an experienced smoker, Jason, and I love to sit between 20 and 25 now. I don't even touch. I mean, I do. I love to get those products, and it's more of because there's a portion of the market that is really wanting that and craving that, right? So over at Cowboy, I always put the market before me, and I think about what the market wants, and the market doesn't want that, so I'm going to provide it to them.
Right.
Now 37%. When you look at that and you look at the bud, and you're like, is it really 37%? I mean, that's a whole nother question.
To me, that's the frostiest bud ever. It's just covered in trichomes, right? And that's why I think, to bring up Megan again, Megan Dobro, I would love to, when she tests it, to be no, it actually has 37% in it, and there's a COA to prove it. You know what I mean? I would love to see stuff like that, because it's I trust Megan. You know what I mean? I trust her.
She's amazing.
I'd make sure that whatever she's doing, I support it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
She's just solid. Getting back to the dispensary side, though, so some pushback might be on TAC, obviously, because there's TAC hunters.
Yep.
I need it at this price, and if the dispensaries are dictating to you, I need this THC level and I need it at this price, that may not be a great fit for you at that point, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes it might work, but...
Well, so I'll give you a perfect example, Jason. I had, it was originally 10 clients that I had built up for this initial order. I expanded it, had to adjust. As you know, things never go the way they operate or you want them in cannabis.
Yeah.
And so... only actually 9 of my clients out of the 10 ordered. They were all super interested, and one of them was not, and they did not take an order. And their main reason was TAC levels, aren't at what they want them to be. And, like I was mentioning, there are 37, 36, 35s on the menu, but that was probably 10%, right? And so, they didn't place an order, and in my eyes, I've been working them for years, and I just think the partnership, I am selling a product that's high quality, high value, and if that store is only chasing TAC, maybe it's not the right partner for me, right? And that's what I'm kind of learning. I mean, I'm a young 29-year-old entrepreneur, right? These are all things I've worked with them for years and sold tons of products, and they've sold very, very well. But also now that I think about it, a lot of the stuff I sold them was, really affordable and always high testing, right? So, it's just it's a learning time now.
Yeah, exactly. So I do feel like, there are some partners out there that we're like, we love and cherish their business, of course.
Of course.
But at the same time, we're just like, there are certain things that detract from the experience, such as getting ghosted on on payment or something like that, which is just the worst. Like, if you're gonna,
That's tough.
ghosting us is just the worst thing you could do. If you talk to us and communicate to us and be like, hey, I can pay you $500 a week for the next 8 weeks to make up this bill, totally cool. We'll work with you on it, because
Of course.
we are compassionate to their situation. But the people who just ghost us and don't talk to us ever, that's the signal that we get. We're like, sorry, we just can't sell to you anymore.
Well, that's what I'm getting to is, I've I just, that's a policy over at Cowboy where if you don't even pay for your first order or you don't communicate with it, we don't sell to you again.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, what we have to do is stand by our brands. And, if you've sold through all of our product in 3 weeks, don't talk to us, don't pay us.
Yeah. And you sold it all.
You've sold it all, right? In a 3-day period, that's 21 days, a net 30 invoice. You've collected the money because it's deposited into the account from your customers.
Right.
It just, it says a lot, right?
Yeah,
and so that's where I've been at.
I hope a lot of those just stores get weeded out, though, because I feel like those are the ones that are going to wash out quicker, because people are going to be like, I'm not selling to this company anymore. Now, obviously, if you want to talk about different terms like net 60 or net 190 or net 120, that's a different conversation, of course. But for our perspective, we do have to push people to COD sometimes. COD kind of does I feel psychologically for them, they're like, oh, if I'm moving to COD, that means the trust has kind of been broken at that point, because it's like, no, you need to pay us before you get your next order.
It's a good point.
We've actually had customers actually come to us and say, we'll pay you COD for this order. And we're like, no, but you owe us for the last order too. So how about you pay the last order first? And
really,
they wanted to jump to the next order and be like, we'll pay you COD for that order. I'm like, you still owe us $8,000 or something like that from a month ago. So you got to pay COD for this one now. So it's interesting because I think a lot of, buyers or people who are procuring the products that go into the stores.
Yep.
There's a wide range of experience and education of what their knowledge is about even just retail in general. The smartest ones are communicating. The smartest ones are making sure that if they need something for us, they're calling us and be like, hey, could you support us in this way? Pop-ups, whatever, right? The smartest ones are doing proper forecasting, and they're making orders before they sell out, right?
You got it.
These are the ones who are they're on top of their game, and sometimes they are managing 700 SKUs or something crazy. And it's just to me, that's just, of course, maybe it's 3 stores or something like that.
Yeah.
It's maybe managing multiple stores and stuff like that. So I do feel for them, and we're definitely a compassionate, empathetic company towards those situations. But the ones that don't communicate, we run out of stock constantly. They don't pay their bills on time. And it's just why are we doing this? It's hurting our business now to be able to even work with you anymore, right?
That's us.
And we definitely have taken it on the chin a few times. We haven't been exposed to too many companies that have gone out of business here, but that's still happening. And so you never know if we're going to get hit again. But recently I think we have about $11,000 so far in 2025 that we're basically never going to collect, unfortunately. So it stinks because we sold the product, they sold the product doesn't exist anymore. And some consumers already consumed it, right? So it's those hurt, right? Every single time. And when you're first starting out in your very early stages, those first orders are going out, that can kind of bury a company.
Well, Jason, that's why I did what I did with this, COD to start.
Yeah.
I essentially built distribution for a lot of other companies, built these great relationships to the point where people trust me and they're willing to COD me. Mm-hmm. And then I launched my own company, and I strategically made sure that I can get as much COD on day one so that we have a great cash position, because you and I know that first year is extremely tough when you're starting your business.
It's
it's sensitive.
Yeah.
It's sensitive, exactly. And one $10,000 missed payment could screw my farmers over, and then I lose trust in my farmers. My constant supply goes down. Before you know it, I can't supply my partners. It's a domino effect. Jason, I see it all going.
They always go
down the line.
Yeah.
It all goes south.
So out of the dispensaries that you're going to be pushing this out to, I don't know if you want to drop any names, of course, but like what in your eyes, what makes a good partner as far as like are you looking at location? I'm talking about like the retail portion of it itself, like, because you had said you were scoping out even like the towns, right? Like what makes a really good partner?
I think, there's quite a few factors or things I could say for that, but I'm going to be very straight up with you. My number one thing is communication. That's what I look for with my partnership, because what I've learned with the communication aspect, that trickles down to a lot of other things, right? Sell through, even if they're, and this is just maybe my mindset, but if they're willing to talk to you, communicate with you, constantly talk, chances are they probably did their due diligence talking to everyone around the town, finding the best retail location, finding what's going to really separate them apart from others and maybe bring their business up. So communications is definitely at the top of it. Obviously, retail location is very important to me. I do look at, whether it's foot traffic or car traffic.
Where do you find those numbers?
I mean, I wouldn't say I necessarily look at the numbers. I more of look at what's surrounding an area.
So you're talking about like the population densities and stuff like that?
Population densities, right, where the traffic may be flowing to, right? So if it's going out of a city consistently, maybe, a dispensary right at, the edge, like for instance, Eastern Cannabis, people leaving Boston, they're always hitting that dispensary first.
And then get back on the highway.
Exactly, and then getting on the highway, right? So like places like that, having that location is very, very important to me. The communication side, I would say those are my biggest two factors. And then I start to look at, maybe like smaller metrics like volume. So how many people they're seeing on a daily basis. What product categories are moving the most through that store. You and I know certain stores are moving a lot of gummies, certain stores are moving a lot of flour, and you got to figure that out, right, as a salesperson.
Do you work at, what data do you look at for that? We obviously use Little Alerts internally.
Always Little Alerts. I've been with Rick from day one. I've been telling Rick, I actually, it was so funny because Bloom Brothers is one of our first clients. I've been working with them a long time.
Yeah.
They're an amazing group of people. And Nate, and I had a really nice phone call. I can't remember when it was, but it was early on, I believe, before I adopted Little Alerts. And I was like, Nate, I'm so glad that you invented this platform, because I was going on websites for an hour after I worked and just looking at menus, sorting by popularity, and then like writing down like what SKUs and product and stuff. And I was doing this all manual. And Nate literally said to me, he's like, Avery, I'm just doing the same thing. He's like, before Little Alerts was around, there wasn't a platform that tracked like sell-through and performance. There was some platforms, but they were more expensive, and and so because I'm a young individual and didn't have the greatest cash position, or the company was in the early stage, we didn't have a ton of money, so those platforms weren't able to be used. And so I was like, how can I get this done? How can I get access to that data if nothing's available? So I just created it myself. And I just always remember like Nate and I having that conversation. I'm telling him how important that platform was for us.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, we use it all the time. So when we're looking at sales velocity, sell through,
that's it.
We're looking at, the categories specifically, like, how does tincture sell versus flower and gummies, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you're obviously playing in the flower market. Like, so, the biggest flower brands I think are going to be like Simply Herb. And what is number 2 right now?
I think Perpetual. Perpetual's up there.
Perpetual is growing crazy, right? And then I was going to bring up Glorious at some point. They're kind of in the mix there, I know.
Glorious is definitely doing good.
But what was that third company? I can't remember. It was Perpetual and then someone else.
Is High Supply up there? No.
I don't remember.
High Supply's always been doing good.
But do you look to, what do you like, how do you compare yourself to like those brands?
So I think, those brands, they're behemoths. I look at, how many units they're moving per day, and it's a lot of units. It's a lot of units, right? For me to get there, it's going to take some time. What I do is I mainly look at those product categories, specifically on the flower side, the ground up or the single pre-rolls, and I look at what dispensaries are selling the most of them. Because obviously those are, in my eyes, right? Like, and this is where my sales guy or my sales head comes into play. I'm one person, 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. I have to maximize that time, right? And so if I'm selling to clients, you know how many of those dispensaries there are in the state, I can only get into so many per day,
Yeah.
right? So I utilize platforms like Little Alerts to look at those comparable brands, look at their performance, and then look at their performance in specific dispensaries, and then I'll go after those dispensaries and I'll talk to them, and you know, I'll provide my pitch, my value add. You know, it definitely has been tough because a lot of those brands, I mean, they're consistently testing very, very high.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I you know, I've really been stressing the full flower, high quality aspect, because that's our differentiator. Is essentially I've found a way to offer that value price, but through our economic structure in the back end, we can still source bulk flower in smalls, grind it up, and co-pack it into pre-rolls at the same price point. So that's big.
So the farms that you're working with right now, they potentially take their A-buds and they sell their own kind of flower on the side as well?
That's really yeah, their focus is really A's and B's. You know, they have their own brands. Their excess, they move to me. And then the last step, which I didn't bring in earlier, is with some of the farms, and one of them, I'm already sitting down with them and talking because I've sold a lot of their product in the first run. But I'm looking to lock in futures contracts with some of my farms.
Interesting.
So I want to lock in.
Is that like your economist background kind of things? Did you graduate as an economy major?
Yeah. So my bachelor's, I know I should have introduced this earlier, but I went to University of Kentucky. I got a bachelor's in agriculture economics, a minor in business. I finished up a semester early and just like got out, and I was like, I want to just get into the world and start working. And so that's where my background was. Is I had corn farmers on my left and dairy farmers on my right. I had, you know, one of my friends in class, he was like the owner of Purdue in all of Kentucky. Yeah. Like they had massive chicken farms, and I, you know, it always resonated in my head ever since I started in this industry. I'm like, why aren't we just cooperating like all the farmers do? Right?
Probably in the back of your head, you're thinking about all as you're having different roles in different companies. You're probably thinking to yourself, why isn't everybody cooperating yet? Because you knew the model from even college days.
Yeah, and it's been around for so long. I mean, before I tell people this big statement, before electricity and lights ran through the streets, the farmers were putting food on the table and helping humans evolve. Right? They were helping us grow and expand, and whether construct the railways and, you know, keep us going.
Yeah, nothing but love for farmers, man.
And so that's, you know, another piece of the puzzle here is I really want to take care of our farmers and make sure we're working together with them because, you know, as you know, early on the state required vertical integration early on. Yeah, they required, I mean, you and I know
everything.
How hard is it for a farmer? We just talked about earlier, for a farmer to also sell, market, manufacture, distribute, collect their money. It's like growing takes up their whole day.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, you start to think about that, and you also look into the other sectors of the world, and you know, you have a lot of companies who are specifically and strategically partnering with maybe a input supplier or like a steel company or a corn company, and they're just working together. Right. They don't they kind of oversee parts of the supply chain, but they let the farmers take care of just growing the input because they're best at it, and then we take it off their plate, and that's kind of the model over.
Yeah, I like that. And so like when you think about the what do you think the revenue mix is from what they're selling versus what you're selling? Are you like 10% of their revenue potentially, or like 50%?
I would say that's a variable number, depending on the farm, right? And so like, you know, some of the farms, for instance, you know, I'm going to be potentially like their brand may not even exist in the future. And
because you're going to do so well with that, and you're going to be able to have all that throughput of sales, that they're going to be supplying you 100% of their stuff.
They're going to supply everything, right? Like I said earlier, reduce their overhead, so they don't even have to, like, there's a lot of aspects of the business they can just, like, not even worry about or potentially sell to us, and we can take off their plate. And then we can pay them a fair market price for their product, so they make money, we make money, and everyone's happy.
You know what you should do?
Talk to me.
I think you should create, especially with this new badging rule that's coming into play, the new badging legislature that
I saw that they're changing that up.
So you can basically have the badges now attached to the employee versus the employer. So if you are a staffed agent of the CCC as an individual, that means you could pick up shifts doing trim work or whatever, or packaging and stuff like that. I wonder if you could create almost a collective of trimmers or something like that that are just, and to support your grows, you know what I mean? So be like, hey, there's co-ops, and be like, hey, there's a Budtender at, you know, Bloom Brothers. There's a trimmer over here that's not doing trim work right now. getting like 10, 15 people or 30 people trim team just goes in and crushes or harvests and trims or something like that at an ad hoc basis, because I think that's probably one of the things that, and this is what I've heard from cultivators, one of the biggest pain points is they have to badge all these people, and because you can't touch the plant unless you're fully badged, which is Corey checks. It's a 2-week process sometimes. Sometimes it's 3 days. Sometimes it's 2 weeks long. And all of a sudden you're like waiting for these people. Oh, these people are waiting to like start work basically. Yeah. And they're sitting around for 2 weeks being like, can I start yet or not? Right. So if you had an existing kind of pool of people or pool of talent of trimmers or something like that and harvesters that could just come in and be like, hey, this is part of the value add of the co-op model. We're going to have our team come in and just like do all of that post-harvest work. Yeah. And then make me move that team next to the next cultivator or something like that. Because as kind of grows come and, kind of get chopped down and grown, you might have a separate side kind of like, not business, but some kind of value add to it.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, because I'd be interested to see like that as because I think that's a needed thing in the market also. And if you're already working with the growers, that might be something interesting to add on.
Yeah, it's a model done like out west. They'll have like trimmers come in for a small period of time and just like, trim up product or harvest down. I think, that's something I would love to implement. I love value adds. That's like one of my biggest things. I love talking to people because at the end of the day, right, like, your sales are great, but what value are you bringing to the consumer? What problem are you solving, right? Like
and you could potentially be that turnkey solution for them.
Exactly.
Just be like, hey, just if you come to the co-op, and we'll start with like 20% of your harvest. Yeah, it's gonna be like the bees and smalls and trim or whatever. Like, and then you're gonna just take it, bag it up, and send it off to. You said Highmark.
Real high. So High Plains.
High Plains. Sorry, I guess all the highs.
No, we're
just like I get the greens. Yeah. Confused. There's so many greens. There's so many highs. There's so many THC acronyms.
So many of them.
it's all. But I get it. That's how the world started here. Yep. So no knocking on that, but I think there is a lot of those. But with High Plains, you're saying like, hey, we'll take all this stuff, and then we're just going to handle everything at that point. Basically, once it's bagged up, we got it. Basically, that's just responsible for making sure you got great genetics and just growing as best as you can. And we'll even bring the team in to harvest it all for you too.
Dude, that's exactly. That's what I would love. And that's right now there's just so many great ideas in my head. And I'm so glad you threw that in because that's going to be solidified up here. It's just right now we're just building the pipeline, right? And once we have that cash flow, then we'll have the ability to do things like that. And I was even talking to a woman named Julie. I believe her name is Julie Buchanan. She actually owns the only. So in the CCC's like license pool, they have a co-op license.
They do.
They do have a co-op license. So the business that I am running right now, like even the state was like, this is probably a good idea to run. It's just who wants to do it. Essentially, I found a way to do it without obtaining that license. Right. But she is the only one who actually holds that license in the state. I just talked to her the other week, and like a second phase thing we want to do is really start like CFA, Cannabis Farmers of America. Right, like a cooperative where we can actually finally come together, just like DFA. Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. I mean, CFA, CFA, right? Yeah. So, that's a late stage thing. Yeah, of course. But creating a true like cooperative network where all the farmers can actually buy in, and then maybe that's one of the value adds of the cooperative. You come in and say, I'll be part of it. I'll pay $5,000 and you'll get trimming access. You'll get distribution access. You'll get marketing right. We'll treat you to a dinner every quarter, like all these things for being part of that cooperative. So
yeah, like that. And you hold like a conference or something like that with
exactly. Yeah, maybe like a nice round table or obviously dinner
knowledge share also. Yeah, to be like, hey, I'm growing it in this, and this is about our climate. This is how we grow things, and this is how we process, and maybe people can adapt to that and stuff like that. So you could even have a phase 2, phase 3 kind of rollout of all these things. I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah. Just to wrap real quick.
Talk to me.
What is what are you looking for right now? Are you looking for dispensary partners? Are you looking for new cultivators? Are you looking for more manufacturers? I don't know. Like, what are you hoping to get out of this podcast?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I really just wanted to, publicly come on here and show people, I'm out here, I'm out in the market. I have, like I mentioned earlier, such a large distribution network of people that I feel confident that we'll be onboarding people to like November, December this year. Yeah. So dispensary partners aren't really demand. It's more of just I want to get out here to emphasize try this product out, right? It's a differentiated product out in the market. It's not, what we're seeing out there where it's maybe, a little trim material, trim and shake, that's great. We're just a different type of product. And at the same time, we're offering a very, very affordable price for people. One of the cool things, and you'll love this too, because you stressed, retail with buying, how important the retail side of things. You and I know it's a for-profit business, right?
Yep.
Margins are extremely important. And so one of the unique value adds over at Cowboy is offering above Keystone margins.
Oh, okay.
And because those pre-rolls are priced at $2.50, and then pre-ground at 7 grams, full flower is priced at $10, that allows our partners to say, hey, look, take a 55% margin,
Right.
and that will still allow for adequate sell-through.
Exactly.
And so that, there's a lot of benefits from bringing on a company like this, and it's really just getting it out into the market so people understand it.
Yeah, I can't wait for the consumer feedback to see if people are enjoying the product and stuff like that. Like, that's going to be huge. Yeah, fantastic. Do you like any other shout outs or anything like that you want to give right now before we wrap?
No, I mean, I think, it was great to hear from Vin the other day. Vin was, Vin and I actually started out in retail. We were both handling.
What company was that?
That was Society Cannabis.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the companies that owed us money back in the day.
Unfortunately, they weren't the best at, paying the bills. And it was just, they weren't seeing the traffic they needed. And it just...
well, there's a green rush, right? And that's how we all know how it started. Everybody was just like, we're going to make tons of money. We grow weed, we sell it, we're done. We're making millions of dollars. And it turns out, if you don't have the right location, sometimes you don't have the right traffic, or the traffic patterns of like, either it's walkable or if it's like, like you said, Eastern Cannabis being right before the highway to get back on the highway and you can stop off. Like, a lot of those things mattered, but I think a lot of people were so short-sighted. They were just like, we just got to get launched as quick as possible, take whatever property. And they got buried in some industrial park, like way off the beaten path, and people aren't going to it. It's not like it was Leicester back, in when the first store launched. Leicester, it was like 6-hour lines to get to the store, right? And people actually heard from someone else the other day. Can't remember who it was, but there's a store, I think it was even Boston. So tourists would come up, they'd fly into Logan from like Georgia.
Yeah.
And they'd come just to get legal cannabis.
Wow, just?
Yeah, just if they'd visit, there was canna tourism back then in the very early days.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
different world.
That's so unique.
Yeah.
I will say one of the big things, and I would love to stress this out to people, is we're in a world that's so saturated, and it's not just this market, right? There's a lot more. I mean, population's growing so frequently. There's more and more people competing for jobs, right? More and more brands compete for shelf space. Be different. Operate differently, right? Do things that are a little bit different. Wear a what's it, right? Just act a little bit different. Because at the end of the day, if you're just doing what everyone else is doing out here, it's going to be really, really hard to get noticed. Yeah,
you're just going to be just another brand on the shelf that nobody's heard of. And you're going to be like, oh, it's kind of interesting, but maybe I'll try it. Maybe I won't try it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you stand up, I get it.
Well, that's why. I mean, you mentioned earlier, the flower category is super saturated, but at the same time, someone can come in and provide a completely different value add.
Yeah.
I feel confident we're gonna do good.
I love it. I think it's fantastic.
So, yeah, that's it.
That's Avery.
All right.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
Jason, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate it.